The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the driveway as James pulled up to his childhood home. After 5 years working abroad as an architect, the familiar sight of the two-story house with its blue shutters made his heart beat a little faster. He turned off the engine and sat for a moment, taking it all in. Tomorrow was his father's 60th birthday, and James had flown halfway around the world to be here. As he grabbed his luggage from the trunk, the front door opened. Olivia stood there, her honey-brown hair catching the sunlight. She was dressed simply in jeans and a light blue blouse, but something about the way she smiled made James pause. In the 3 years since she had married his father, their relationship had been polite but distant. James had been away when they met, and he'd only seen Olivia during brief holiday visits. "James, you made it." She hurried down the steps, arms open for a hug. He accepted her embrace awkwardly, noticing for the first time how good she smelled, like vanilla and something floral. "The flight was long, but worth it," he said, pulling away a little too quickly. "Your father will be so happy. He's been counting down the days." Olivia took one of his bags. "He's out picking up a few things for dinner, but he should be back soon. Come in, come in." Inside, James was surprised by how different the house felt. The dark furniture his mother had chosen was gone, replaced by lighter pieces that made the rooms feel bigger and brighter. Family photos covered one wall, including several of James that he didn't remember sending. "You've made some changes," he said, trying to keep his voice neutral. Olivia glanced at him nervously. "I hope you don't mind. Your father said it was time for a fresh start." She hesitated. "I kept all your mother's special things in storage. I would never." "It looks great," James interrupted, suddenly feeling bad for making her uncomfortable. Really, the house needed this. Relief washed over her face. "I'll show you to your room. I've kept it just like you left it, though I did put fresh sheets on the bed." As they climbed the stairs, James noticed photos from his father and Olivia's wedding. His father looked happier than James had seen him in years, since before his mother's illness. In one photo, Olivia was looking up at his father with such love that James felt a small pang of guilt for being so cool toward her all this time. His bedroom was indeed the same, but cleaner than he'd ever kept it. A small vase of fresh flowers sat on his desk, and the windows were open, letting in a gentle breeze. "I'll let you get settled," Olivia said. "Come down when you're ready. I made your favorite, at least, your father said it was your favorite. Lasagna." James turned to her surprised. "You remembered that?" "I remember everything your father tells me about you." Her eyes, a warm hazel, met his. "He's so proud of you, James. The way he talks about you. I feel like I know you, even though we've barely spent time together." For the first time, James truly looked at this woman who had married his father. She wasn't trying to replace his mother. She was simply trying to build a family, one that included him. "Thank you," he said, and meant it, for making him happy. "After Mom died, I wasn't sure he ever would be again." Olivia's eyes grew bright with unshed tears. "That means a lot, coming from you." She touched his arm gently. "Welcome home, James." As she left, closing the door softly behind her, James sat on his bed and wondered why he'd never noticed before how beautiful his stepmother was, not just on the outside, but in all the ways that truly mattered. The next morning, James woke to the smell of coffee and bacon. He found his father in the kitchen, newspaper in hand, looking exactly as James remembered him except for a few more gray hairs. "There's my boy," his father exclaimed, jumping up to hug him tightly. "Best birthday present I could ask for." They sat talking about James' work abroad while Olivia moved around the kitchen, occasionally joining their conversation. James noticed how his father's eyes followed her, full of warmth and love. It made him happy to see this, though something about the way Olivia moved, graceful and light on her feet, kept drawing his attention too. "I'm going to need help with the party decorations," Olivia said. "Would you mind, James? Your father is banned from helping with his own surprise." "Of course," James agreed, finishing his coffee. His father squeezed his shoulder. "I have some calls to make anyway. Business never stops, even on birthdays." After his father left, Olivia led James to the garage where boxes of decorations waited. As they worked side by side, hanging streamers and arranging flowers, the awkwardness between them slowly melted away. "So tell me about Italy," Olivia said, standing on a chair to hang a banner. "Your father says the buildings you designed are beautiful." James steadied the chair, his hand briefly touching her ankle. It was amazing, but I missed home more than I expected. When Olivia wobbled slightly, James instinctively placed his hands on her waist to steady her. She looked down at him, their faces suddenly close, and for a moment neither moved. James felt his heartbeat quicken before she smiled and stepped down. "I need to get something from the attic for the party," she said, her cheeks slightly pink. "Can you help me?" The attic was dusty and filled with old furniture. While searching through boxes, James accidentally knocked over a small trunk. Several notebooks spilled out, and as he gathered them, one fell open. His eyes caught a beautifully detailed drawing of whitewashed buildings against a blue sea. Below it, in neat handwriting, "Santorini, someday." "Oh, those are private," Olivia said quickly, taking the notebook from him. "You draw beautifully," James said. "Is that Greece?" Olivia hesitated, then nodded. "I've always dreamed of going there. The white buildings, blue domes, clear water. It's been my dream since I was a girl." "Why haven't you gone?" She shrugged, busying herself with the boxes. "Life happens. Dreams wait." She smiled, but James saw something sad in her eyes. "I was saving for years. But then other things became more important." They found the box of special birthday decorations and headed downstairs. As they worked, James couldn't stop thinking about the wistful look on Olivia's face when she mentioned Santorini. Later that afternoon, while Olivia was busy in the kitchen, James's father pulled him aside. "I see you and Olivia are getting along better," he said, pleased. "She's different than I thought," James admitted. "Dad, she had a travel fund for Greece, didn't she? What happened to it?" His father looked surprised, then sighed. "She never told you. The money she had saved for years. She used it to help with your final year of architecture school when my business was struggling," she insisted. "Said your future was more important than a vacation." James felt like the wind had been knocked out of him. "She paid for my education. A woman I barely knew? Who I wasn't even nice to?" "That's Olivia," his father said simply. "She has the biggest heart of anyone I've ever known." As James watched Olivia through the kitchen doorway, laughing as she frosted his father's cake, he felt something shift inside him. The woman he had kept at a distance for years had sacrificed her own dreams for his without ever telling him. She deserved to see those white buildings and blue waters, and suddenly James knew exactly what he needed to do. The birthday party was a success. Friends and family filled the house, and James's father beamed with happiness all evening. As the night wound down and guests began to leave, James slipped away to his room. He opened his laptop and began searching for flights to Greece. His mind raced with possibilities. 2 weeks in Santorini would be perfect. Enough time to truly experience the island. He clicked through images of stunning blue-domed churches and crystal waters, imagining Olivia's face when she saw them in person. Money wasn't an issue. His work in Italy had paid well. The real question was timing. A soft knock interrupted his planning. "Come in," he called, quickly minimizing the browser window. Olivia peeked in, holding a slice of cake. "Your father's asleep." "Too much excitement and champagne," she smiled, placing the cake on his desk. "I saved you the last piece with the corner frosting. Your dad said it was always your favorite part." "Thanks," James said, touched by the gesture. He watched as she glanced curiously at his laptop. "Just catching up on some work emails." "On your vacation? You're as bad as your father." She shook her head but smiled warmly. "I wanted to thank you for today. Having you here meant everything to him." James hesitated, then made a decision. "Can I ask you something? How much time could you take off work, hypothetically?" Olivia looked surprised. "Well, I have 3 weeks of vacation saved up." "Why?" "Just curious," he said casually. "Dad mentioned you work too hard and need a break." She laughed softly. "Maybe someday." "Good night, James." After she left, James returned to his planning with renewed energy. The next morning, while Olivia was grocery shopping and his father was reading the Sunday paper, James approached him. "Dad, I need to talk to you about something important," he said, sitting down across from him. "It's about Olivia." His father lowered the newspaper, looking concerned. "What is it?" "I found out what she did with her travel fund," James explained, "and I want to give it back to her. I want to send you both to Santorini for 2 weeks. His father's eyes widened. "James, that's incredibly generous. But please, Dad, let me do this." She sacrificed her dream for me without even knowing me. She deserves this. After some discussion, his father agreed, his eyes shining with pride. She'll be overwhelmed, son. Over the next few days, James threw himself into the planning. He booked a beautiful villa overlooking the caldera, arranged for a private tour of the island, and even found a sunset dinner cruise. Each night he stayed up late researching the perfect experiences, while during the day he spent time with Olivia and his father, growing closer to both of them. One afternoon, while helping Olivia in the garden, James found himself studying her face as she tended to her flowers. The sunlight caught in her hair, turning it golden. When she looked up and caught him watching, she smiled, and James felt an unexpected flutter in his chest. "You're staring," she said, wiping dirt from her hands. "Sorry," he replied, embarrassed. "I was just thinking how happy you've made my father. He's lucky to have found you." Olivia's expression softened. "I'm the lucky one, James, and now I have you back in his life too. It's all I've wanted since I met him, for him to have his family complete." In that moment, James felt something shift between them, a new understanding, a deeper connection. As they worked side by side in the warm afternoon sun, their hands occasionally brushing, James wondered if the trip he was planning might change more than just Olivia's life. It might change his too, in ways he hadn't expected. That evening, he finalized the booking for the villa, staring at the confirmation page longer than necessary. The gift was meant to repay a debt, to give Olivia back her dream. But somewhere along the way, it had become something more. A chance to truly know the woman who had done so much for him and his father. 1 week before James planned to reveal his surprise, everything began to fall apart. He was in the kitchen making coffee when his father walked in looking pale and tired. "Dad, are you okay?" James asked, immediately concerned. His father waved him off, "Just a bit under the weather. Probably caught something at the office." But by that evening, his father was in bed with a fever. The doctor came and diagnosed him with a severe flu that would take at least 2 weeks to recover from. No traveling anytime soon. James sat in his room, staring at the confirmation emails for the Santorini trip. All that planning ruined. He was about to close his laptop when an email notification appeared. The villa he had booked was canceling due to unexpected renovations. They offered a refund or a different property, but the alternative wasn't nearly as special. "Everything okay?" Olivia asked from his doorway. She had been caring for his father all day and looked tired but concerned. "Yeah, just work stuff," James lied, closing his laptop. "How's Dad?" "Sleeping finally." She leaned against the doorframe. "The doctor says he'll be fine, but needs complete rest." James nodded, his mind racing. The trip was falling apart, but maybe that was for the best. Over the past days, his feelings for Olivia had become increasingly confusing. Sometimes he caught her looking at him with an expression he couldn't read. Their conversations lasted longer than necessary, and he found himself making excuses to be near her. "You've been so secretive lately," Olivia said suddenly. "Your father thinks you might be seeing someone back in Italy." James laughed nervously. "No, nothing like that." "Good," she said, then quickly added, "I mean, your father would want to know about someone important in your life." "There's no one," James said, meeting her eyes. Something passed between them, electric and unspoken. Olivia broke the gaze first. "I should check on your father." She turned to leave, then paused. "Whatever you're planning, James, I hope it works out." The next day, James received another email. The tour company in Santorini had double-booked their private guided tour and needed to reschedule. It felt like the universe was telling him to cancel everything. That afternoon, while Olivia was at the pharmacy getting medicine for his father, James sat beside his dad's bed. "The trip's falling apart," he admitted. "Maybe we should just cancel." His father studied him carefully. "It's not just about the trip anymore, is it?" James looked away. "I don't know what you mean." "Son, I've seen how you look at her." His father's voice was gentle, not accusatory. "And how she looks at you when she thinks no one notices." James felt his face grow hot with shame. "Dad, I would never." "I know," his father interrupted. "You're both good people. That's why I think you should still give her the trip." James stared at him in shock. "What?" "But you should go with her instead of me." His father held up a hand when James began to protest. "Listen to me. I'm too sick to travel, and that trip means too much to cancel." You two need time to figure out what's happening between you. Nothing's happening, James insisted, but his racing heart told a different story. His father smiled weakly. James, I'm not blind. Olivia deserves this trip, and you deserve to be happy. Sometimes connections form where we least expect them. But she's your wife, James said, his voice barely above a whisper. She is, his father agreed, and that's why this is complicated. But life is short and unpredictable. All I want is for both of you to be happy. Maybe this trip will help you understand what that means. Later that night, James paced in his room, his father's words echoing in his mind. The idea of traveling alone with Olivia filled him with both excitement and dread. What was he feeling? What was she feeling? And how could they possibly navigate this situation without someone getting hurt? As he looked out his window at the night sky, James knew he had to make a decision. The gift for Olivia was meant to be life-changing, but he never imagined it might change his life too. 2 days later, James finally found a new villa with an even better view than the first one. He managed to reschedule the tour and even added a special sunset dinner overlooking the caldera. Everything was back on track, except for one major change: his father wouldn't be going. The evening James had chosen to reveal his gift arrived. His father was feeling better but still weak, resting in an armchair in the living room. Olivia had made a simple dinner, and the three of them ate together, talking about nothing important. James could barely touch his food, his stomach tight with nerves. After dinner, James brought out a large envelope tied with a blue ribbon. "I have something for you, Olivia," he said, his voice slightly shaky. "A thank you gift." Olivia looked surprised. "For me? But why? Your visit has been gift enough." His father nodded encouragingly from his chair. "Go ahead, open it." Olivia untied the ribbon and slid the contents out of the envelope. Inside were the flight confirmations, villa reservations, and a beautiful photo book of Santorini. She stared at the papers, not understanding at first. "What is this?" she asked, flipping through the pages. "It's a 2-week trip to Santorini," James explained. "The flights, the villa, everything is booked. It's yours." Olivia's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with shock. "But how did you? Why would you?" She looked from James to his father and back again. "I found your journal," James admitted, "and Dad told me about how you used your travel fund for my school. This is me paying you back." Tears filled Olivia's eyes as she looked down at the photos of white buildings and blue waters. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll go," his father said gently. "It's your dream." Olivia shook her head in disbelief. "This is too much. I never expected anything in return." "I know," James said. "That's why you deserve it even more." She stood up suddenly and wrapped her arms around James, hugging him tightly. "Thank you," she whispered against his shoulder. James closed his eyes, breathing in her scent, feeling her warmth against him. When she pulled away, there were tears on her cheeks. "But who will take care of you?" she asked his father. "I'm already much better," his father assured her. "My sister is coming to stay for a few days, and then I'll be fine on my own. You've earned this break." Olivia looked back at the trip details, running her fingers over the photos of Santorini. "This is the kindest thing anyone has ever done for me." James cleared his throat. "There's one more thing. Dad can't go with you because of his health." Olivia's face fell slightly. "Oh, I see. Well, maybe I can postpone it until—" "No," his father interrupted. "The trip is in 2 weeks, and everything is non-refundable. James will go with you instead." The room went very still. Olivia's eyes met James's, a mixture of emotions flashing across her face: surprise, confusion, and something else James couldn't quite name. I couldn't ask that of you," she said quietly. "You're not asking," James replied. "I'm offering. Unless you'd rather go alone." "No," she said quickly, then blushed. "I mean, I'd love the company." His father smiled, watching them both with knowing eyes. Then it settled. Later that night, Olivia found James on the back porch, staring up at the stars. She sat beside him, still holding the photo book of Santorini. "I keep thinking I'll wake up and discover this was all a dream," she said, her voice soft in the darkness. "It's real," James assured her. "You deserve it." She turned to look at him, her face illuminated by the porch light. "Why did you do this for me, really?" James considered his answer carefully. Because you changed my life without even knowing it. Because you make my father happy. Because he hesitated, then finished simply. Because you deserve to have your dreams come true. Olivia reached out and took his hand, her touch sending warmth up his arm. Thank you for giving me back something I thought was lost forever. They sat there together under the stars, hands joined, both aware that in 2 weeks they would be watching a different sky together, far away from home and the familiar boundaries that had defined their relationship until now. The flight to Greece was long, but neither James nor Olivia minded. They talked more in those hours than they had in all the years they'd known each other. James learned about Olivia's childhood in a small coastal town, her love of painting and her dreams beyond just visiting Santorini. Olivia listened as James shared stories of his work in Italy, his friendships, and his goals for the future. When they finally arrived at the villa, both were exhausted but too excited to sleep. The view was even more breathtaking than the photos had promised. Endless blue sea meeting an equally blue sky, white buildings cascading down the cliffside like frozen waterfalls. I can't believe I'm actually here, Olivia whispered, standing on the balcony. The evening breeze lifted her hair, and the setting sun painted her skin golden. James watched her from the doorway, feeling his heart swell. Was it worth the wait? She turned to him, her eyes shining. More than worth it. The villa had 2 bedrooms on opposite ends, giving them both privacy. That first night, they ate dinner on the balcony, drinking local wine and watching the stars appear one by one in the darkening sky. To dreams coming true, James said, raising his glass. Olivia touched her glass to his, and to unexpected friendships. The next day, they explored the narrow streets of Oia, getting lost in the maze of white buildings and blue domes. Olivia took photos of everything, her face alight with wonder. James found himself watching her more than the scenery, captivated by her joy. At a small cafe overlooking the caldera, Olivia suddenly reached across the table and took his hand. I still can't believe you did this for me. Seeing you happy is thanks enough, James replied, surprised by how true the words felt. That afternoon, they visited a small, secluded beach. The water was cool and crystal clear. James swam out into the deeper water, then turned to see Olivia standing at the edge, hesitating. I'm not a strong swimmer, she called out, embarrassed. James swam back to her and held out his hand. I won't let anything happen to you. She trusted him, taking his hand and wading deeper into the water. They floated together, his hand supporting her back as she looked up at the perfect blue sky. I've never felt so freed, she said, her voice quiet but clear. As the days passed, they fell into an easy rhythm together. Mornings exploring the island, afternoons lounging by their private pool, evenings watching the famous Santorini sunset from their balcony. They took a cooking class and laughed as they made a mess of the traditional Greek dishes. They hiked along the caldera edge, breathless from both the climb and the views. On their 5th night, they took the sunset dinner cruise James had booked. The boat was small and intimate, with just a few other couples. As the sun began its descent, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, the captain pointed out the best spot for photos. Olivia stood at the railing, the wind tussling her hair, her face glowing in the golden light. James lifted his camera to capture the moment, but paused. No photo could ever do justice to how beautiful she looked right then. When she sensed him watching, she turned. Aren't you going to take the picture? Some moments are better just lived, he said, lowering the camera and moving to stand beside her. As the sun touched the horizon, Olivia leaned against him, and James instinctively put his arm around her shoulders. They stayed like that, watching the sun disappear into the sea, neither speaking of the growing tension between them, the unspoken feelings that had been building with each passing day. Back at the villa that night, Olivia lingered at her bedroom door. Thank you for today, she said softly, for everything. James stood in the hallway, painfully aware of how much he wanted to close the distance between them, how much he wanted to kiss her. But he didn't. Instead, he simply said, "Good night, Olivia." As he lay in bed later, watching the moonlight play across his ceiling, James wondered what his father would think if he could see them now, and more importantly, what would happen when they returned home. Their final evening in Santorini arrived too quickly. James had arranged for a private dinner on their villa's terrace, complete with candles, fresh flowers, and a local chef to prepare traditional Greek dishes. As the sun began to set, casting its golden light across the white buildings and blue sea, Olivia appeared from her room wearing a simple white dress that made her look like she belonged among the island's beauty. "You look beautiful," James said, his voice catching slightly. Olivia smiled, a hint of sadness in her eyes. "Our last sunset here." They ate slowly, savoring both the food and their remaining time on the island. The wine flowed freely, and with it, their conversation grew deeper. They spoke of the past 2 weeks, of favorite moments and shared discoveries. Neither mentioned going home. After dinner, they moved to the edge of the terrace where 2 chairs faced the breathtaking view. The stars were beginning to appear in the darkening sky, and the lights of the town below twinkled like fallen stars. "I need to tell you something," Olivia said suddenly, her voice soft but determined. "These 2 weeks have been the most wonderful time of my life, not just because of Santorini, but because of you." James turned to look at her, his heart racing. "Olivia." "Please, let me finish," she interrupted gently. "I've felt something growing between us, something that both thrills and terrifies me." She took a deep breath. "I love your father. He gave me a second chance at happiness when I thought that part of my life was over. But with you, I've felt something different, something I never expected to feel." James reached for her hand, holding it tightly. "I felt it too." They sat in silence for a long moment, the weight of their confession hanging between them. "But we can't," James finally said, his voice thick with emotion. "He's my father. You're his wife." Olivia nodded, a tear slipping down her cheek. "I know." James gently wiped the tear away with his thumb. "In another life, in another time." "Yes," she whispered, "in another life." They stayed on the terrace long after the stars filled the sky, talking about everything and nothing, holding hands and allowing themselves this one night of honesty before returning to reality. As dawn approached, they finally separated to pack for their journey home. The flight was quiet, both lost in their thoughts and the bittersweet knowledge that their time in Santorini had changed them forever. When they arrived home, James's father was waiting, looking much healthier and eager to hear about their trip. They shared stories and showed photos, carefully editing out the moments that belonged just to them. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, James found Olivia in the kitchen making tea. "I've decided to take that job offer in Boston," he said quietly. "I think it's for the best." Olivia nodded, understanding in her eyes. "Your father will miss you." "I'll visit often," James promised, "and maybe someday when enough time has passed, we can all take a trip together, back to Santorini." "I'd like that," Olivia said, her smile gentle. "Family vacations." The word family hung between them, redefining their relationship in a way that honored both what had happened and what could never be. 3 months later, James was settled in Boston when he received a package. Inside was a painting of the Santorini sunset, beautifully captured in Olivia's artistic style. A note accompanied it. "Thank you for giving me my dream. In return, I give you this memory to keep. Your father and I are planning to visit you next month. He can't wait to see your new place, and neither can I. Family is the most precious gift of all, in all its complicated forms. With love, Olivia." James hung the painting in his living room, where the sunlight caught it each morning. It was a reminder not of what he had lost, but of what he had gained. A true family bond, built on respect, sacrifice, and a love that had found its proper place in their hearts.